In this video, we will show you how to replace your transmission shift cable on the Chevy Trailblazer. Part of this will be located along the driver's side of the transmission. The rest of it will be located inside of your passenger compartment. Let's get into it. Okay, friend, let's get started on our job. Make sure you're on a flat level surface because we will need to get underneath the vehicle. Once you've done so, we're making sure that we put on the emergency brake. Now we can make our way underneath the driver's side of the vehicle. Now underneath the driver's side of the transmission is where you're going to find your transmission shift cable. We'll be separating the cable from the shaft that comes out of the transmission. You can use a small pry bar for this or a trim tool. It's important not to disengage this until you're sure that you have your emergency brake cable engaged. With that broken free, we'll follow the cable rearward towards this bracket. This bracket has a lock. We'll use a small pick to remove the lock, and then we can remove the cable from the bracket. Go ahead and give that a quick inspection. Make sure it is reusable. We'll set this aside. Now with the lock out of there, the next thing we have to do is use some pliers. You'll find that you have two locking ears, one on each side of the cable. We'll squeeze those in, take hold of the cable, and give it a light tug rearward to separate it. Now we'll continue following that cable to the point that it's mounted to the body of the vehicle. You can use a small prying device or just some pliers. Go ahead and take that right out of the body. At this point, the cable can move around freely. If you were to look just above this area, you're going to find a rubber grommet where the cable goes up through the body of the vehicle. We'll gently pry this up and through without causing any damage to the body of the vehicle. You can use a pry bar for this or whatever you might happen to have. At this point, we'll pause underneath the vehicle and make our way into the passenger compartment. Inside of the passenger compartment, we're going to continue on with removing our two forward cup holders. Typically for these, you can take hold of them and carefully pull them out of place. Underneath each of them, you'll find that you have one 7mm headed bolt. Go ahead and remove the pair. Now let's make our way inside the center console. You're going to find that you have several Phillips head screws, two along the front, next we'll make our way deep inside this area. There's a couple more. Now if you continue rearward, there's a small little rubber trap door and a couple more Phillips head screws. Let's take hold of this and lift it up and out of position. We can set this aside. With that out of the way, have a look down inside this area. You're going to find that you have two 7mm headed mounting bolts, one on each side of this to remove. Let's just make sure that our parking brake is in the fully upright position. We'll put the key in the on position. The vehicle does not have to be running. Once we have it in the on position, we're going to take hold of the shifter with our foot on the brake and bring this back as far as possible. Now at this point, to make sure that we do not drain the battery, let's make our way to the negative battery terminal to disconnect it. We'll use our 8mm for this. Back inside the passenger compartment with the shifter pushed back, you can see right in the front center, there's a small screw. We'll be using a T15 Torx bit to remove this screw. It's just a small grub screw. You don't want to lose that. At this point, you should be able to carefully lift this up and down. Now that we have that grub screw out of here, the next thing we're going to do is start removing this area from the plastic trim panel. You can use a small screwdriver or a small prying device and carefully make your way in between the boot area and this plastic piece. There should be 4 corners with locking tabs. Just want to try to get underneath each of those. Sometimes this comes up easier than others. You just have to work your way around. There we go. Now we'll start lifting this up. Keep in mind there is a wiring harness that comes down along the back side. To remove this, you can use a small pick, small screwdriver, whatever you might happen to have. We'll just get right in between this rearward area to unlock it and gently separate the 2 wiring harnesses. Of course, a quick check for corrosion on each of those. It's very important. Once you've done that, we can lift this up and out of place. We'll set this aside. There we are, we'll separate that. Give each side a quick inspection. Take hold of the center console and we'll start lifting it up and out diagonally. Let's remove this from the vehicle. Now that we have the console out of the way, we have a clear view of our range selector cable. Now to separate this, you can use a pick or a small screwdriver. It does have a locking tab holding it in place, so we'll be using the small screwdriver or pick to make our way inside this area and gently start separating it just like this. You can see it spreading away. While we're spreading that away, we're going to start lifting this up and off of this piece. Then we'll continue following it to where it connects onto the handle area. At this point, we'll take hold of the shifter, press down on the yellow tab along the top, and you should be able to slide that forward. Now we'll separate this area. Once again, using a small screwdriver. You could also use a trim tool if you want to. Let's be careful not to cause any damage. At this point, we have plenty of slack from this area. We'll pause here and make our way into the driver's side. Now over on the driver's side, we're going to have to start removing a little bit of the carpeting so we can make our way to the cable located under it. To start getting the carpeting up and out of the way, we're going to remove the door sill. Use a plastic trim tool for this so you don't cause any damage. We'll make our way underneath this and pry it up. Sometimes it comes up a little easier than others. Make our way over here. Separate along the top. For this, it has a small push clip across the front. We'll just pop that out of place. You can use a trim tool for this. Just try to make our way underneath the push clip so we can separate it from the paneling. Get this out of here. Now heading over towards the center, we'll be removing this Phillips head screw. Now we can start lifting up on this carpet. Now as you start pulling it away, you're going to find that you have some insulation that holds the carpeting down. It's important to make sure you have this insulation over the carpeting when we put it back together, so you don't have to worry about the carpeting making its way over any of the pedals. Let's pull this right out of here. There we are. Now we can start pulling the cable up and through here. On the passenger side, we'll continue on by removing our Phillips head screw in the center here so we can remove this entire panel. Now we can take hold of this and start pulling it straight rearward. It does have some clips holding it in along the front. Slide this out of place. We'll have a quick look. There's those locking clips that I spoke of. Set this aside. Before we start pulling the original cable out, it's important to make sure you tie something on the very end of it, so as you pull it out, you can tie that piece onto the brand new cable and then draw it back through the original routing. I straightened out a coat hanger and curved the tip. Now with that through there, we'll just go ahead and apply some tape in this area to hold it in place. You don't need too much, you just want to make sure it does not fall off, and we of course don't want to cause any damage to anything. All right. With the carpet pulled up and away, we'll start drawing this down and through. Now you may find that you have a small issue in this large area right here. If it feels like it gets bound up, just carefully make your way back and forth, gently twisting along the way, and continue on gently pulling as well. You may have to make your way underneath the carpet a little bit. Now obviously we won't continue pulling any further than we have to because we want to make sure that we do leave our cord or hanger in place. Remove the tape. There it is, friend. Let's take the end of that cable and we'll attach it to our hanger here. Now I'm going to apply some tape in this area to hold it together. Once I've done so, I also want to apply tape in this area. As you can tell, it's a flat spot. We want to try to make this so it comes down at a slant, so when we start pulling it through, it'll work its way through rather than getting caught. There's one. Now we'll work at this end here. This could be a little bit harder overall. Just want to try to make a nice slant. That's fair. Now let's continue tugging this through. As we're tugging, we're also going to be gently pushing on the cable itself to help this area along. There we are. Now we can remove our apparatus from this area. We'll remove all the tape and we'll continue on with installing the cable. There we go. Let's start attaching our cable here on the very end. Press that in, listen for a click, give it a tug to make sure it is secured. Now we'll swing this down to its anchor point. Listen for a click from the lock on the passenger side there. We'll give this a little tug up and down. We don't want to break anything, but you do want to make sure it's secured so it doesn't pop free while you're trying to shift. Now we can take the far end of the cable and we'll start carefully bringing this down through the hole in the floorboard. We don't want to cause any damage to it, so be extremely careful when you bring this down. Now we'll apply our rubber grommet onto the floor. It does have several locking tabs that make their way around. We want to make sure we press this in so we can have a secure fitting on this. You don't want any moisture making its way up and causing an issue with mold on your carpeting. You should also wipe down this area. That looks good. There we are, we've got that pressed in. When you're pressing this down, it's easiest to lock it in by pressing in the center. If you were to press along the edge, it's going to start lifting up on one side and then the other side and continue on. Pressing in on the center will make it go down where it needs to be. Now we can start putting our carpet back in the original position. As you remember, when we were pulling this away, I mentioned that it has the forward insulation that needs to cover over the carpet, holding it in place. It's very important to have it in the proper positioning. Let's get this in position. We'll be paying attention to the hood release handle. And if you were to look along the bottom of this, you'll find that you have several tabs that make their way across. And looking in the door sill of the vehicle itself, you'll find that you have metal clips for each one of those tabs to set into. Ours are in fairly poor condition. It's common for them to look like this. We'll take this and we're going to slide this right on through. Now we'll align it with our locking tabs coming across here. Drive it into position. Once you feel as though you have it in the proper positioning, we'll continue on with our locking tab. Let's get this felt insulator in place. This has the locking tabs, and those will press into this center console area here. Let's get this aligned. We'll gently press it in, being careful not to damage anything. Clip on each side. Now we can continue on to each of our 2 Phillips head screws. There's one on each side of this to hold it in place. Let's do the same on the other side. Start bringing in the center console here, paying attention to our emergency brake lever. Now, as we start bringing this down into position, we need to pay attention to our electrical harness, which is down inside this area. We want to reconnect that. Now, this is kind of a tight area. My hand's going to be right in the way for a second. Just going to line those up. We'll squeeze them together. As we squeeze them, you want to take that purple lock and swing it up and over the other side. Once you feel as though you have those 2 areas together, go ahead and give them a light tug. We don't want to cause any damage, but you do want to make sure they are secured. Now, looking at this, you can tell it has a couple little push tabs here. Those need to align with this bracket. We'll bring this down a little bit further. It's going to be hard to see, but there are 2 holes for it. There we are. With that secured, we can start bringing this down. Once you have that settled in place, we'll continue on with our 2 7mm headed bolts that hold this down. We had one on each side. There we go, that one's good. We'll do the far side. Get our tray in here. Now this will have several screws. 2 of them are down along the bottom. That's where we'll start. Let's snug them up. Get the 4 upper screws in place as well. Now we've got our 7mm headed bolts for inside of each of these cup pockets in the front. We'll make sure we have the wiring harness in an area that we can hold it. We'll start bringing this down. We want to be careful not to damage the boot on our shaft. Obviously, we do need to see underneath it, so we'll just keep holding it up just enough that we can reconnect that wiring harness down along the bottom. Press it in, listen for a click, double check to make sure that is secured. You don't want it falling off while you're driving down the road. We'll continue on bringing the boot down into its original position. Once you feel as though it's in the proper positioning all the way around, we'll press in the 4 locking tabs, one on each corner. Double check to make sure that's secured in place. Now it's time for the handle itself. We're going to bring this down until it's completely set in position. Double check to make sure that the boot is not twisted in any way, and then we'll continue on with our 1 grub screw right in the center here. Now if you wanted to, you could use a little bit of blue thread locker on this. Never use any red thread locker in this application. Right there is where it feels as though it bottomed out. Let's just make sure that's snug. We don't want to break it. Take hold of the handle, try to give it a little twist. Assuming it does not twist, that should be tight enough. Now we can put in our cup protectors. As far as the front ones, there are 2 little tabs. And if you were to look inside of each of the pockets, there's 1 on each side. So we'll just go ahead and line that up, slide it down into position. Same thing for the other one. Should slide right in. We've got the rearward one. Once again, tabs. Line that up side to side and press it down and into position. Get this in place as well. Put your foot on the brake. Let's put the shifter into the park position. Make your way back under the hood, reconnect the negative battery terminal, and remove the key from the ignition. All right, it bottomed out. Make sure that's snug. Now we can remove our key and safely make our way underneath the driver's side of the vehicle. Under the vehicle, let's continue on to attaching our cable to the bracket along the driver's side of the transmission. Now you want to pay attention to the cable itself. You'll find that on the area that goes through the bracket, it has a raised area. We want to make sure that that raised area aligns with this lower aspect here. It won't fit in any other way. I've got that aligned. Now we'll press it in. Listen for a click from each of the 2 ears, 1 on each side. Go ahead and give that a tug rearward to make sure it is properly secured. Once you've done so, we'll make our way here and we're going to connect that. Now we can attach the cable to the shift select lever. For this, we'll just use a little bit of lubricant right in this area. We'll align it and then you can press it together. Sometimes you can do this by hand. Other times you may have to carefully use pliers. Press it on, give it a wiggle, trying to tug it off of that lever. We do not want this to fall off. Now that we're sure that this is secured, let's make our way back to this position. We want to make sure that we put this lock in between the 2 ears of this. So we'll have it, making it so it spreads those ears apart. That's going to lock this into the bracket. If you need to use a small hammer, go ahead and tap that into place. Double check to make sure that's secure, and now we can make our way to the rearward mounting point. We'll press that in. You need to make sure that this is secured. We don't want this cable coming down and rubbing on the drive shaft while you're driving down the road. That will cause premature damage. Okay, friend, we've got the vehicle back together. At this point, we can disengage the emergency brake. Start up the vehicle and run it through each and every one of the gears, ensuring that the cable's functioning properly. Aside from that, go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.